Welcome to Rams Iconic, presented by 1800 Tequila, the best taste in tequila. Please drink responsibly. I am your host, DeMarco Farr, and this is the podcast where we catch up with some of the greatest players in Rams franchise history. My next guest played 7 seasons with the Rams. In those 7 years, never missed a start, never missed a game, 112 straight starts. 852 combined tackles. That's the most in franchise history. He was also a 3-time All-American, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year at Ohio State. Please welcome the Rams Iconic, former Rams linebacker James Laurinaitis. What's up, big dog?
What's up, D-Far?
I'm so excited, brah. Old Double Nickels back in the house. What's up?
How about that? It's like hearing your voice is like it's like a flashback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To the old times. Because the best part is not only, for the games, but also I used to listen to you on the fast lane.
Yeah.
And so, you'd hear, obviously, what was that, 101?
101.
I used to listen to you all the time, which is ironic because a lot of times it was like, there were some L's in there, but it was easier to listen to y'all in the offseason.
You know what? That's funny. I told you, everybody behind the scenes has a Laurinaitis story, and they're all positive.
Mm-hmm.
But the one question, you won so much at Ohio State. I think you only lost 8 games, and then you come to the NFL, come to the Rams, and it's hard to get a win. It's hard to get a victory.
Yeah. Was that 2-14 the first year or 1-15?
1-15.
All I know is that 1-15 year one. We draft Sam. We have the year that really it felt like we were on the rise. I believe played Seattle right in 2010, the last week of the season.
Charlie
winner
goes the flea flicker.
Winner goes to the so the whole deal. And then lockout happens. And new coordinator, right, on offense. And that year 3 was a scramble. But, it was – when you love the game of football, though, D-Far, you know this. Like, ask these kids all the time. Like, if your why for playing the game is – and everyone has a different why. But if it's not rooted in just, like, the love of playing the game or the love of competition, I remember Chris Long just loved to compete. I'm not sure the everyday grind of it was his favorite, but when it came to Sunday and it was Orville's practice, like me versus you, that's what he relished. And so in those moments, if you love that, you'll get through the bad times because you just love playing and you realize how grateful you are to play. But if you just love surface level stuff and you're eliminated from the playoffs in November?
Yeah.
Or, you're making postseason plans already. That's a bad deal.
You know what? I look, being up in the booth and watching you guys, Chris Long, Steven Jackson, all you guys, OJ Atagwe, you guys putting it on the line even after you've been eliminated. That told me a lot about your love of the game and who you are. And I said this to these guys. I wish guys like you, Steven, Chris, had a chance to experience this era with McVay, the success, because you guys went through so much trying to get it done.
And that's why I was so happy for, you mentioned Chris specifically, being able to leave and then have success, with New England and also with Philadelphia, being able to win Super Bowls. Because you're right, the grind was a lot. But really, we had such a fun room. Like, you remember those teams we had, and we had such a fun locker room when it came to the defense especially. You talk about some of those years with, Eugene Sims, William Hayes, Robert Quinn, AD was young, Michael Brockers was young, Chris Long, Ogletree, you name it, Rodney McLeod, who's still going. We had a fun young team, and you just wish that we got to enjoy as much fun on the field as we did in the locker room and really around each other. But yeah, dude, there's some great memories though.
Oh my God.
Regardless of the record, there's some great memories.
It's funny. How did you like the TV side? Because you're coaching now. You went from the field. You did some TV, radio, media stuff. How'd you like that?
I enjoyed it. I was fortunate because I had a really good team that I worked with.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time at the Big Ten Network. There's obviously, as you know, there's differences to games and studio. And, studio, you're giving little nuggets about everything happening, games, you got to be much more in depth, and you have to be able to respect the teams that you're calling. When you're up at the NFL level and doing those level games, which I never did a TV game with the NFL, but I did some Westwood One radio, and you're provided such great information by the clubs the college teams don't have to be that outgoing with a lot of their information,
Yeah.
There's times where you'll find some teams don't even list their whole coaching staff or support staff online because they don't have to. And you're trying to figure out, well, who's new there and who does that? It's kind of baffling, to be honest, but I enjoyed it. I like the challenge of the games because you had to study. It got you back in the film kind of routine. The ironic thing is that, when you're TV, you're traveling with your team, your little squad every weekend. But I just found that the weekends in the fall are the best time to share it with those that you love, right? And I was always away from my family, and my family would always be back. And although I'm busier hours, like, my family's a part of the team. So it's like home games, you got your wife and girls on the sideline and you're celebrating after the game, all that stuff. It's a family feel. And that's what teams are. And so when you're in the media, I never really just had that deep feeling, although I enjoyed it.
See, the reason I brought that up, because the Rams had Bobby Wagner last year, and getting to watch him up close and watching what he does, it was a treat to watch that guy go to work. But we start having conversations about the greatest linebackers that we've ever seen, or in horns, that played for the Rams, and I'm like, how come no one ever brings up James Laurinaitis? Well, you can't compare the two. I said, what do you mean you can't compare the two? Look at their first 7 seasons. I think you had 16 sacks in your career? About 10 picks. I think you led the league in tackles. He did it twice. I'm like, why can't you compare the two? So actually he does. He reminds me of a James Laurinaitis, the way he goes about his business. But nobody wants to hear that. You know what I mean? It drives me nuts that way.
Me, I don't really concern myself with all that. I thought it was, awesome to see B-Wags and some horns, and obviously respected his game from afar. For a lot of years, and he obviously had a really good season last year, and decided to go back to Seattle. But I don't know, man. I think a lot of times too is that when you don't win football games, you know what I mean. That all goes into it, because in reality, it's no different than when you're doing TV or you're in media, and you're going and you're watching, like when you're working for the Big Ten Network. You'll get an Ohio State game. You'll get a Penn State game in conference. That's part of the contract. So, most of those games, it's Ohio State versus the teams that are at the bottom of the conference. So it can be Ohio State Rutgers from time to time. It can be Ohio State, whoever's having a bad season, right? Because Fox isn't putting that on Big Noon Kickoff. They want to give that to Big Ten Network, which is owned by Fox. So you start to watch these teams that maybe aren't at the top, and you're like, wait a second. This running back at Rutgers is really good. His name's Isaiah Pacheco.
Right.
Like, this dude can play.
Right.
But all of a sudden you start bringing up, like, who are the best running backs in the Big Ten? Nobody's saying Isaiah Pacheco.
Somebody else, yep.
Except coaches. Because coaches see it, that play him, right? So It's the same thing. Like, how many guys in the league are really good on bad football teams that nobody talks about? Well, and there's biases everywhere, right? Like, if you live on the East Coast, how many times are you bringing up really good Pac-12 football players? Probably not, because you're not staying up till 9, 10 o'clock to watch kickoff. You're not seeing them. So there's always, who knows, man?
I just remember your rookie.
I let you debate that stuff, dude.
Your first game, I think you had 15 tackles, and you lost, but nobody wanted to. I'm like, did you see him play? The guy was everywhere. You know what I mean? AI is in his name.
What's funny is I always remember the bad plays, and I think a lot of athletes do. I think you were such perfectionists that you remember the ones that you should have got. And there was a touchdown run Seattle had in Seattle. That was the first game.
Oh,
and
Jones.
I missed. Yeah. And the guard climbed up, and I'm supposed to get on the outside of the guard and spill the fullback, but the guard reached me, and that thing went.
Oh, yeah.
And our safety, I don't know who was that safety, but took a bad angle, and that thing, he hit his head on the goalpost. I don't know. It may have been Craig. And it wasn't his fault. It was my fault, because that thing's supposed to at least stop his feet a little bit.
I remember.
That thing had it was a straight 40-yard dash.
See, 852 tackles. You only remember the bad plays. So look, we do on this show. It's called My Favorite Play. Do you have a favorite play? Can you remember one that stands out?
Oh, man. It's one of my favorite plays. I think it was a play action pass against Tampa Bay. I intercepted it. And the reason being is that we worked all the time on play action passes and zone coverage. Linebackers have to get deeper than usual, right? A lot of play action passes, it's max protection. there's more time to throw the deeper route. So for just having a rule of thought, like if your normal zone drop is 10 to 12 yards, and I always tell people, like, your depth of your zone always factors on so much. What is it, 3-step? Is it a quick game? Is it 5-step? Like, what's the quarterback's depth? Was it play action? So anyway, it's a play action pass. So I had to get depth, and we worked it. And there was just a deep comeback, like an 18-yard comeback. And I turned and I ran right to the spot, and I turned around right in phase and jumped and caught it. I believe it was Josh Freeman who threw it to me.
Tampa Bay. Yes, sir.
Tampa Bay.
Yes, sir.
So I remember just getting it and jumping up and celebrating with Cortland Finnegan. And yeah, just I remember there's that play. There's a play against the Commanders, and Washington. And I think it was Rex Grossman that I intercepted. It was the same thing. They got me on a fake weak lead, kind of deep comeback. In the first half, I was still playing run. I mean, I was all over it. Like, oh, it's a run. Nope. I had no depth. And then I came back to it, and I got it in the second half. So those are the plays. And then obviously, you can go to the Spags era.
Yeah.
There are plays that are kind of, to be honest with you, where you don't make the play that are some of my favorite. For instance, you manipulate the slide of an offensive line. Like, so in Spags' system, there was a lot of, and even Greg, different blitzes, different styles. But a lot of the Mike did, or the linebackers in general, it's who's showing what to get the slide to go a certain way so that the overload gets home.
Right.
And there's sometimes where you go and you show something, and all of a sudden you show and you hear that center go, hey, rip, 55's Mike. And all of a sudden you're like, yes, because I know that the other guys are free.
Yeah.
And then boom, sack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you're fist pumping because you're pumped for your boys, but you're also pumped because you did what you practiced so hard to do.
Wow. See, this is why I think you're home, man. I mean, you with a video board and a chalkboard behind you. You're back in a linebacker room. I know your family is your happy place, but this is your world, man. This is where you live. This is where you need to be.
It is. It feels right. It definitely feels right. It feels great, obviously, to be back home in Columbus at Ohio State. Thankful for sure of. It's funny, you hear schools all the time talk about, oh, it's the brotherhood, right? It's the brotherhood. I mean, a lot of people say it, but I'd be hard pressed to find another school that actually lives it out more than Ohio State. And what I mean by that is, you make certain phone calls trying to get into coaching, and when you're a former player, sometimes if you don't do it right when you're done, I think sometimes people assume that you're not serious because you don't know the grind. And what's ironic is that, we do, because if you really are a guy who studied the game as a player, you grind. Yeah. Like you grind and then you go do it on the field.
But I know what you mean about moving on. You're moving to that next level. Yeah.
You work into the next level, and then people think, well, I don't know if you really want to do it and this, that, and whatever. And so there have been other times I tried and you didn't get a chance. And then you mentioned the brotherhood. Like, it took Marcus Freeman, who I played all 4 years with at Ohio State. We're in each other's weddings, and you're really close with a dear friend to be like, hey man, can you give me a chance to at least, try this coaching thing out? And he's like 100%. So I was blessed to spend a year at Notre Dame with him. Well, obviously a dear friend. And then the opportunity came to come back home to your alma mater, and you got to take it. It's good to have the girls and the family back in Columbus.
To your point, I mean, you have to be a solid guy to make that phone call, and then somebody says absolutely 100%, because I'm sure they get phone calls from other guys. And they're like, hell no.
And that's the hard thing. Like, you understand why the coaching profession is there is a lot of, like, who do you know? It's a relationship thing. But it's also hard because if you have a really good relationship with somebody, doesn't mean you necessarily think they're a good football coach, or could be. So, I mean, I'm sure there has been, and I've witnessed it with my own eyes, people that you could tell are really good friends. That's great. But when it comes on the line of like, hey, are you going to stick your job out?
Wow.
For this, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a fine line. Like, who can I trust, right, in this business that's nuts? But then also, like, I trust you, but do I trust you enough? I trust you to have my back. But do I trust you enough to also coach and get the most out? You know what I mean? Like, that's real. That's real. I think for any job, right? Like, if you are a guy who makes decisions at a job and you have a friend who wants a job underneath you, Like, you might be like, yeah, I trust you with my family, you have my back. But do I trust you enough to have, am I going down? There's a layer of like,
I'm not sure.
I think a lot of times, and all that means is like, you got to be good at what you do too. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful. I think the thing was Marcus knew my study habits as a player from playing together all 4 years. And so he knew that I would, how hard I would work at it. And so I'm grateful still.
Well, 112 straight starts, and I can't remember a single defensive timeout you called when you guys were confused. Now, you had to call timeout to save time trying to win the football game, what have you, but it's never been a situation where the defense wasn't lined up correctly. So that carries over. And something else, this is how we connected. Jim Hannafin, remember? God bless Jim Hannafin. He was telling a story about our Super Bowl year, the previous years, and how Vermeil was telling the coaching staff he was going to stick with Tony Banks. So you know Hanny being Hanny. He was the next to speak. He got up and he starts to tell the coaches, what we need to do now is get a jump on selling our houses and call U-Haul now because we're all going to get fired, right? So he's telling us about how bad we were going to be in 97, 98. This is pre-Super Bowl. I had no idea we were bad in 97, 98. We were close. I think you felt the same way. I don't think you saw yourself as 1-15, 2-14. You were a field goal about 7 points short of being 8-8 on a 1-15 year. You know what I'm saying? I don't think you knew you were a bad football team. Is that right?
No, that's right. And I think a lot of times too, athletes we convince ourselves no matter what the spread is, no matter what any of that, like, we're going to win. Like, you have a game plan. And when you look at a game plan, you're like, oh yeah, we can win this. And you're right. Like, that rookie year, you felt like you were so close in so many. And there have been numerous times throughout my whole time there in St. Louis that you really felt, gosh, man, if we could just get this piece or this player is able to stay healthy, or that was all the time. And I really never felt like it was like false motivation either. I felt like it was real. And I mean, I'm sure there'll be some fans who will call me delusional for thinking that. And there'll be some fans who are like, you're absolutely right. But I always felt we were right there. Because, some of it, it's just, we had some bad luck and then you just didn't execute. And we had some timing too, like the division. Remember how bad the division was early on in those years? And then all of a sudden it ramped up, and next thing you know, you got Russell Wilson and Kaepernick and that whole deal. And I tell people all the time, man, when you used to go up against the 49ers and they had, Gore and Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker, like, that was a problem. Like, how are you going to match that?
Right.
Is this 12 personnel or is this 10 personnel? Because those two cats can fly.
Yeah.
Like, you spread them out. Next thing you know, you got safeties on them. They can't run with them. Like, what do you want us to do? Let alone linebackers. So
right. Wow. That's just crazy, man. Look, your dad was my hero. Did he ever tell you like that DeMarco is a mark? Because every time I saw your father, I would geek out. And I don't care because he's an icon to me. So, did he ever tell you I was like a pain in the ass?
No, he didn't. My dad always enjoyed those moments.
Yeah.
He always enjoyed meeting fans. He loved talking wrestling. He loved talking about the biz. Honestly, it's I think that's, especially if you caught him in the right time. Now, if he had done it for like 4 hours straight and then you came up to him, his patience would wear thin. But if you were like one of the few people that saw him, especially as he aged, he liked to relive the glory days.
Oh my God. I just marked that. I really did. And the last thing I wanted to do was piss off Animal. Really. You know what I mean? So I tried.
That was a lot of my childhood. That was a lot of my childhood. Last thing I wanted to do was piss off Dad. There's no doubt.
Man, thanks for coming on. Look, I can't wait to catch up with you again. We will stay in touch. You're one of my favorites. Double nickel in the house. 852 tackles, franchise leader, James Laurinaitis. Man, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, bro.
That's a wrap on this episode of Rams Iconic, presented by 1800 Tequila, the best taste in tequila. Please drink responsibly. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with legendary James Laurinaitis. I'm DeMarco Farr. We'll see you next time.